Elliot, you dumb bitch. What's the point of this video? What's a vampire? Everyone knows what a vampire is. Take a guy, give him dental problems. He goes sucky sucky. Middle-aged white women are really horny for it. Vampires. But this is World of Darkness. We know what's up. There's a complicated history of conspiracies, horror, and shittery that got us here. But we'll get to that another time. Vampires have some of the most complicated histories and overarching social webs in the setting. Those are their own beasts to slay. Today we're covering what vampires are, literally. Vampires in pop culture are a very diverse cast of creepies. Thematic through lines like being dead and drinking blood are pretty common. But over the past 100 years or so, a gargantuan number of different interpretations from different cultures have been cannibalized together. The specifics, like their physiology, how to kill one or hold one at bay, vary from people to people and story to story. That's what we're covering today. What flavors of vampire are kicking around in World of Darkness? And baby, it's like a windy soda machine, unsanitary, sticky, and in desperate need of service since 2018. So, let's get started. First and foremost, these bitches be dead. I know that feels like a given, but we're starting from square one, and sometimes vampires get the zombie treatment, like it's a biological disease. Like you're a living person that's just sick with super rabies. No, baby girl, you're fucking dead. Your biological functions cease. There is no heartbeat, no breathing, no hormones. Your body is biologically, medically dead in a literal sense, animated and trapping your sapience only by the power of the canine curse. As commonly assumed, vampires drink human blood. This replaces not only the blood they were robbed of in the embrace, but also most other bodily fluids. Vampires also use up the blood they take, burning it like a car with gas to function. When they rise, when they move, when they do anything except lay still, they use up the blood in their bodies. And if they wish to not be left stranded, they need to replace it. Vampires are created by the embrace, a very thorough and specific ritual. It's not enough to get bit. The embrace involves a candidate being drained of all their blood. All of it, the whole tank. The poor bastard's then given some of their sire's blood. Sometimes quite a bit, sometimes a drop. It doesn't really seem to make a difference. Sometime later, they pop up as a fresh leech. What's it like being a vampire? It's pretty fucking miserable, all things considered. Even setting aside Camarilla Anarch bullshit, actually being a vampire is generally unpleasant. Feeling all of your somatic processes stop is rather unnerving. Your own body, its very nature skewed, piloting a rotten flesh machine, deteriorating under you. The actual decay won't show until you face true death, when someone actually puts you down for realsies. But surprise, surprise, being stuck in a dead body isn't a nice way to live, or unlive. But the worst of a vampire's minute-to-minute existence is the beast. Vampires retain a certain amount of humanity. Literally, it's a stat in the game, a representation of how much empathy, compassion, and lingering emotion the vampire feels. Their humanity stands in contrast to the beast, the vampire's new compulsion to feed, kill, and destroy. It's important to note that the beast is often anthropomorphized to a certain extent, described as if it were a sapient entity existing within the vampire. This is of debatable accuracy. For the most part, the beast isn't an entity, and descriptions of it as such are just being flavorful, conveying the power a vampire's instincts hold over them. Within a vampire's psyche, their humanity and their beast battle for dominion, deciding a vampire's fate. This is quite deliberate, as there are two penultimate states a vampire can ascend or fall to respectively if one side wins. The first is Golconda, a state of enlightenment fueled by humanity that culminates in a vampire becoming mortal again, functionally being quote-unquote cured of vampirism. Well, shit, that's a big deal. How do you do it? Who was the first? Can you cure a vampire to avoid killing them? And we don't know any of that. We barely know anything about Golconda. It has never been described in particular depth, deliberately left up to the interpretation of your game's storyteller as to whether it's even possible, let alone how to achieve it. Golconda's opposite is wassail, the fate that lurks for any who can't stave off the beast. When a vampire enters a state of extreme stress, such as a life-threatening fight, they may enter a frenzy, where their mind reverts to an animalistic fight-or-flight state for their own survival. For every frenzy, a vampire's humanity drops. If it drops to 0, the vampire fails to hold off the beast, entering wassail and becoming a wight, a creature of violent instinct that can never be saved or have a coherent thought again. Even the most depraved and violent of vampire societies recognize how bad that is. Even those that worship their state as vampires hang on to some humanity to avert wassail and becoming a wight. So, to recap so far, vampires are the walking dead. They drink human blood, they hold on to some of their human emotions, and walk a tightrope between said humanity and falling into being a mindless monster. Pretty simple so far. Okay, let's talk about the cannibalism. Diablerie is the act of one vampire eating another. This doesn't mean eating all of them, like their skin and bones. Diablerie just means one vampire draining another of all their blood. And it has a most powerful effect. Vampires are divided into generations. Cain, yes, that Cain, was the first vampire, and is therefore the first generation. The second generation consisted of 3 childers Cain sired, who then sired the third, who then sired the fourth, etc. Each vampire is a generation further down the line from their sire, and with each generation, the power grows thinner. Diablerie defies this. By devouring another, a leech can climb up by 1 generation. A 12th generation vamp becomes an 11th generation in power and ability, and is functionally considered now of that generation. However, as tempting as such growth can be, as with everything in World of Darkness, it comes with risk. Such rapid growth isn't without consequence. It isn't as if you, a potential Diablerist, would simply be made as if you had been turned by a higher generation vampire. Rapid leaps in power such as this can come with disfiguration, changes that make it apparent how the vampire came to such power. In addition, there are tales that, at times, the soul of a victim of Diablerie can rise up and usurp their murderer from within, allowing them to take over their killer's body. Socially, Diablerie is rather frowned upon. The Camarilla and other vampire clans that like to present their sophisticated hoity-toity fronts will very generally kill you for committing Diablerie. Others, like the Sabbat, actively encourage it for the most part, with the most part having a very strong asterisk of so long as it isn't to the disadvantage of any other vampire around you, which it inherently is. So take that for what you will in your plans of undead domination. Next, let's discuss vampiric magic, the disciplines. Disciplines are so diverse and interwoven that a whole video could be spent discussing them in depth. But here, we'll simply get our foot in the door, lay down a foundation to build upon more at a later date. So, to begin, disciplines are schools of magical abilities that vampires can make use of and study to strengthen their use. These abilities are as varied as the people of the earth. Disciplines include super speed, strength, and endurance, blood sorcery, which is itself a vast umbrella with much under its domain, giving oneself animalistic components, enforcing one's will on a target to force compliance, making oneself invisible, evaporating into mist, summoning specters to do their bidding, and many, many, many more. Functionally, any vampire can use any discipline, in much the same way any human can develop any skill with regular practice. However, one's bloodline may align with some disciplines more closely than others, and one's own natural talent will play a strong part in how easily a given discipline will come to them. And even with great practice, functionally, a vampire can only grow to so high in power. A 12th generation vamp, newly made in the modern day, could spend a century practicing night after night, and only be a single step closer to the power his sire's 10th generation sire held the day he was turned. I think it's fitting that we save true death for last. Vampires are immortal. Without outside intervention, a vampire will never die. However, with the exceptions of Cain and any other antediluvian vampires that still survive to the modern day, very few vampires enjoy such long-lived lives. Vampires face two great enemies, the sun and humanity. Both they can never be rid of fully. The first they cannot snuff out, and the second they would starve without if they did. Direct sunlight will scorch any vampire to ash, with scarce few exceptions. Even common fire poses a threat, both serving as an effective way to damage a vampire and invoking a powerful fear response that only the mentally strongest leeches can withstand. Biological substances, such as drugs or poisons, are of little effect on a vampire, although some alchemical concoctions are known to cause harm, and anything in a victim's bloodstream can have an effect as the vampire feeds. Staking, the act of driving a wooden spike through a vampire's heart, is exceptionally effective at incapacitating them, although this only paralyzes the vampire, and is commonly used to detain a vampire unalive for capture. Faith is a rather fantastical but interesting weapon against vampires. True faith, that is the unshakable foundation deep faith in something, can exert power over a vampire. This typically manifests in religious iconography, such as the belief that a cross can repel vampires, although the thing in question doesn't need to be religious to manifest true faith. Its wielder only needs to believe in their heart of hearts that this icon has power over the undead before them. The vampire is a terrifying thing, most so in the way its horror can reach you in any number of ways. The threat of a predator that can infiltrate your home, using charm and guile and social expectation to creep close before baring its fangs. The threat of being unpersoned, of being turned against your will into something fundamentally monstrous. The threat of addiction, of having a hunger so gripping, so commanding of your needs, that you'd bring harm and suffering to the world, to the people close to you, just to slake it. I've never seen anything quite like World of Darkness. Getting down in the dirt and crunching through the nitty-gritty as deep as you possibly could to explore what a vampire could be. It's convoluted, it's confusing, and it hasn't aged well at times. But I wouldn't have it any other way.